I'm Bhavedhir V. Bharadwaj. Welcome to episode 22 of Genesis of Tomorrow. The following is a conversation about industrial design, powering businesses through designing workflow, and more with Mr. Tojo Jacob Thomas, a design strategist and deputy general manager at Godrej Boyce and co-head at the Godrej Design Labs. Also, folks, 86.1% of you watching this have not subscribed yet. So, if you get even the slightest bit of value from our show, please support us by clicking that subscribe button so that we can keep improving the quality of the episodes and keep on bringing such wonderful guests over for you. And now, without any further ado, let's get right into it. Enjoy and thank you. Okay, we are rolling now. First of all, welcome on the show, and it's a delight to have you here. I'm
Yeah.
really interested and excited to talk to
Mhm.
you about the entire domain of designing with regards to industry and businesses, of course, right? And I think it will be really beneficial for anybody who will be turning in to
Mhm.
get to know about how, firstly, industrial design as an entire field has evolved over time.
Right. 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 So should I go right now, or do you want to
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
contextualize?
yeah.
Okay, awesome. So this field of design has been a very it's been a field forever. When the first cavemen and the first humans walked around and started finding tools which they made out of stone, I think that could be the earliest found traces of design, where they made a stone into a sharp object which was used for hunter-gatherers, right? So the formation of that also of making a tool can be considered as a act of design. So from that time, and then you look back into history and millenniums and a lot of millions of years which passed by, and then you look at something like the industrial age, which happened over a couple of centuries before. And at that time, there was this industrialization bout which brought a lot of automation of processes and manufacturing. And that's where the name and the word, the etymology of the word comes as the industrial designer. If since we're talking about design, so we spoke about design. Design is the act of uh, planning or the act of putting things together in a certain outcome, which with a for a desired certain outcome. That's the act of design. And particularly in the case of industrial design, brings this one sensitization that from an industrial setting where there is a lot of, like say, manufacturing or a production which is involved, which basically makes it an industrial design. Now, that's one definition or a form of explanation of it. The other one, also, which is loosely understood as well as misunderstood by a lot of people, also could be like the industrial design is just form only, but there's much more to it. Industrial design is more, it's more cohesive overall, and there's always a debate between product design, industrial design, design overall. In the end, it is all value creation for a certain outcome. So I think industrial designers primarily work not only with the form, they also work with the function, they also work with the symbolism. They work with semantic value, symbolic value, like semiotic value, which I know maybe they sound a little technical, but what that means is that it's a more thought through form of being able to bring value to a customer or bring value to anyone, and in the form of a physical product. Now, also, I'd want to like bring this aspect of like industrial design as a heavy physicality to it. So it is physical products which we're dealing with. Now, that doesn't mean that industrial designers do not find use in non-physical environments such as IT or let's say any other form of designs appreciation, but primarily we deal with physical products. So there's cars, there's furniture, almost everything which you see and surround yourself with has been designed by someone. And the likelihood of it being designed by industrial designers is higher. And if it's not an industrial designer, there is always in every piece or an act of making a product, somebody who's done the industrial design role in it. It could be an industrial designer who's formally trained, or it could be an engineer who's doing the industrial design, or it could be just the labor and the manufacturer who's done that industrial design to make that product a little bit more accessible to the customer, a little bit more helpful, a little more attractive, and all of those attributes which make a mere product into a slightly more higher value customer focused product. So all in all, I think that's a very, very, very off the cuff kind of an explanation of industrial design. I hope that helped. Yeah.
It did. It did. Personally, on a personal level, what do you think ab- is something about this entire domain that keeps you hooked onto it?
Hmm. Wow, personal question, right? So the personal answer to it is a heavy bent of curiosity. If I think if you have a disposition of a heavy bout of curiosity, you are naturally drawn to settings and challenges where there is a lot of a curiosity driven approach, and in that industrial design plays a big role because as industrial designers we find ourselves to be, and this is not just industrial designers, product designers, industrial designers, as designers we find to be in the crosshairs or in the middle of a lot of intersections. So we are in between manufacturing, in between marketing, in between strategy, in between the top leadership, in between the customer. So there's, I consider this as the front of the house and the back of the house, where like a business basically has whatever you see front of the house in the market, which deals with the customer, the retailer, the entire value system is front of the house. And everything in the back of the house is like, say, the design, the manufacturing, the labor, the personnel, the admin, all of that back of the house. Design happens to be that one team or that one act of work which controls the physicality of a product. So, and in industrial design particularly, so if say there is a supply chain ask, you made a certain form or a function of a design, and then you come to know that there is supply chain problems because the carton which is being in this product being fitted in is not being stuffing into a container. Like you need to increase those volumes. So a good example could be IKEA. IKEA industrial designers are famous for the fact that they flat pack and their design is made to be flat packed. So that's the supply chain directive which came into industrial design. So when an industrial designer in IKEA is designing a table, he is making sure that it can be flat packed. So you see an example of how a supply chain point uh, changes the direction of industrial design. And another example could be like say just pure aesthetics would be like say industrial designers playing the role of so closely with marketing. Marketing gives us briefs in which they say that the customer research which has been done talks about these colors, these graphics, these overall aesthetics and form, which are likely to be purchased by customers. So then the industrial designer then aggregates that and tries to make sure that the design is reflecting and using that feedback. And so that was using that strategy which was put forward by marketing. Similarly, when you deal with the salespeople, as designers go into the sales teams along with sales teams to customers, we get to see firsthand how these products which we have designed go out into the market, and the salespeople are the ones who are actually selling that product. So they get first-hand feedback, and when we go along with them, we then get that first-hand feedback of how that product is being actually put to use, which in our ideal world is the theater of interaction with the customer. Because we are sitting inside boardrooms like such, in which we're having discussions, and then we have our creativity at play where we're putting things together and putting value together. But that's just our scenario of what we think the customer should have, should use, ought to use. When you actually go out to the market, when the market speaks the truth in terms of acceptance of a particular product, a particular service offering, whatever. The saying that there's so that the sales feedback again is something which is very honest. Customers get a chance to be able to tell you, okay, this is not what I like, this is what I like, or I love it, or I hate it. And then we can again go back to the drawing board inside our boardrooms and be able to process this. So the act of a design function, may it be industrial design, product design, engineering design, whichever be, can be able to, you know, pull and become like the scrum master of putting things together. And in doing so, there's a lot of value to it, it's a store of value. I would compare it with like say gold or Bitcoin, where you there's a storage of good value of like bringing things together. And it's not at all a comparison with other functions or themes because comparison is the thief of joy. But the point being is that it's important to be able to uh, control the offering to the customer. That control normally happens at a design stage. So in the design stage, we tweak any tweak in the function, the form, it eventually goes out, it multiplies tenfold because that one design then becomes million products and goes out into the world. So there's a seat of control there, which is in design teams where the drawing change, like in manufacturing, which is the background which I come from. There's the concept of drawings and engineering drawings in which we have something called as a control copy. The control copy is the final drawing, which is like, say, from your early stage of concept design to embodiment design to prototype design to finally considering a mass manufacturing product. The details of those mass manufacturing products is captured in the form of a set of control copy drawings. Once you have a control copy drawing set, those sets are kept in control in manufacturing to be able to stabilize and give that same product out in the same value form. So a small example there. I hope that helped in answering.
Mm.
So in learning this aspect of design, and as I said, in connecting it back, my personal journey is a lot of curiosity driven. When I get this chance to work with multiple domains and multiple industries, that curiosity is heavily fed and stemmed with a curiosity that I want to see if this is what I think, this is how I do in the form of a product. If this product then goes out in the market, and then I'm curious to see is that product being accepted in the same way how I thought it was to be. So it's a very humbling experience in that. So it's curiosity matched with humility, which is given by back to the market, and you then come back to the drawing board. So the act of going, conceptualizing, putting it out there, then comes back to you, and then you retweak, and then you do go back. And in different industries, really is something which has kept me into this field a lot. So it helps a curious brain, keep active. Yeah, go on.
I agree. I agree. And a very interesting bit that you mentioned is how the entire everything about design is the sweet intersection spot of
Hmm.
all different aspects of a
Yeah,
business or any project in general.
right.
Talking maybe of one singular aspect of it that you talked about, branding and marketing, and then we can move on to different things from there. But
Sure.
it's evident from a lot of companies and businesses that have stood the test of time that
Right.
these brands, their logos, the very first thing that any customer associates the brand with, the logo,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
they are, so much work might just go into it towards deriving and settling down on this singular entity that for the majority part will be displaying and representing your business firsthand.
Right.
As a
Right.
designer, what is your approach towards all of this branding side of things?
So I've had the good fortune to work very closely with marketing and branding teams. I've had also the chance to also work and build brands myself in the past. But the point being is that you said it right, that it's a very, very iconic way. Like branding plays a very, very vital role, as has very similar to very how industrial design and design kind of captures the value in the physical essence. I think branding and in marketing teams, the branding team in the way a logo or an identity is formed is also very, very capturing the spirit and the value in the non-physical realm. So, like you've heard of you've heard of names like brand equity and brand salience, in which are hardcore marketing Kotler like terms, but the formation of those identities and how design kind of helps in the formation of that identity. So, like, take an example of a logo, which is the simplest capture or store of value. That one symbol slash uh, name or a trademark or a word map or all of it stores so much value of what that company represents, what the products represents, what the company represents, the value systems, the offerings, the capabilities, the assets, all of that just gets captured in that one uh, embodiment. And that's critical. That's very important. In fact, like if I had to give more precedence to something other than the physical product, I would say that the brand is something which is on equal par, where that the identity and that value is captured in the form in such a small, tiny piece of thing which actually represent all of it. Like I don't want to give the cliched example of Apple's logo, but like just many, many examples of that nature where just seeing that logo, when you see the swoosh of Nike, you kind of get an understanding that, okay, this is associated with Nike. So you can see the two, the Red Bull, Toro Rosso, and you like identify everything with adventure. And then you have these different brand personality types and everything. But the point being is that it works very closely with product because in experience design we use a function called as like say the 5E, which is the five. It's like the entice, the enter, the engage, the exit, and the extend of the experience of dealing with a customer. One of the entices part, one of the parts in the entice realm of that 5E is the brand. So you are enticed by that brand, and so if you have a company like a brand like Apple, and then it's an Apple product, you are already enticed by it. You haven't even physically touched it or seen it, but oh, it's an Apple product. Okay, fine. So the brand is already playing in your mind in the entice phase. Then when you go and physically touch the product, feel the product, see the product, you're visually engaging, you're tactily engaging. So in doing so, like branding plays such an important role in enticing the customer. So a lot of us deal with like say brands and non-brands, and then sometimes some of us are experimentative in trying to try out new brands, versus some are brand loyalists. That if it's a headphone, I'm going to take only a Block Point or only a Bose, because you've been brand loyalist to that brand, and that brand has created that kind of an aura. So that's how important branding is to design, and because it does half of the work of making the customer ready to experience it. So, to give you a small analogy, I'd give the example of like, say, when you go to say a Michelin star restaurant, or if you go to like a good restaurant, the restaurant itself has built up that aura that I want to receive good food there. So by the time I'm there, that restaurant's aura has already built so much of the experience that whatever the food be, I know I'm going to enjoy it. I've built it, as opposed to somewhere the experience is bitter but as good as the food could be on the plate, because that have had a bad experience of coming and reaching there entirely. Like the food per se, no matter how good it is, you won't have the same sensitization, as opposed to like say in the other case where you build the entire aura and you're ready to receive the food. So similarly, branding and marketing would have that kind of a play on the product. So it's not an either or, it's an and, so that you have the experience also, the enticing, and then you can have the engaging with the product. You have the enter of the product. So going back to that 5 E's, it's like entice, enter, engage, exit, and extend. So the entice part builds up the experience, and then you go and engage, and you start with the entering of the experience, which is like the unboxing, to the physicality of the product. Then the engaging is the actual function check where you're using the product. Then is the exit, which is like say if it's a disposable product or a non-disposable product, the act of using it and putting it aside. And then the extend is actually the extended life of that product, and you thinking it through. So all links to and fro to branding in a way, because then it starts representing that. If it's like I go back to the IKEA example or the Apple example, that brand identity and image plays so much of a role in how people think that they expect this in the product. Yeah, this is an Apple product, man. It should have this. It ought to be this. It ought to be representing high stability, high reliability, as opposed to just another brand which does not come along with that kind of quality. So it works for designers a lot. And if in those cases where there's a lesser brand salience, it's a little tougher for design people to then be able to bring more value, because there's much more expectation out of the product. So it's like, imagine in the restaurant again, the example there, that if you had a bad experience reaching till the table, and the table has to be the table better, the plating and the food better be really good to impress you now, because there's a lot to cover up. Similarly, the case of products, the product should talk, and the product should not just talk, should really impress to counter what brand can't do, and vice versa. Does
Uh,
that help?
yes, it did. Also, following on to this, last conversation that I had with Miss Komal, and we talked
Mm-hmm.
about this, how umpteen times the newer startup esque ventures treat design and branding and these issues as a secondary subject, and how that plays a very vital role in decreasing the kind of engagement and customer loyalty, as you very well touched upon, to be creating that. What do you think is the firstly the number one mistake that new ventures can make in regards to designing and branding and all these aspects, and what do you think must be done to cater to them?
Yeah, it's a good point you bring up, and I think with the younger generations, and just when I say younger generations, I don't mean age-wise. I mean more like people who are starting new ventures, irrespective of age. Uh, The rate of change and the rate of exposure right now is very high. So in both these cases, the time to getting feedback is very high, and the time to getting more options is also increasing. Like there's just so many options for everything right now. In that, there's an added pressure to design and branding and everything put together to be able to stand out. Now, sometimes the best way to stand out is by not standing out, if that makes any sense. Like you'd want to be that, okay, that's that brand which is, well, वो तो thoroughbred brand है, and it's kind of like a brand which just uh it's known for its awesome quality, it's known for its thing. They don't need to market at all. So they don't need the brand per se so much, because their products in itself and the experience of the products is already so good. So it really depends in which context you're operating in. So there are many kind of startups who are operating in shark territories, where there's a lot of companies in that. There is a need in that context for design to be able to stand out. You need that, because if not, you will be just one among the crowd, and the chances of you making business value is lower. Whereas in many startups basically have first to the market, like something new which they're offering to the market, either in the form of a product, a capability, an offering, a service. And in that lies design's ability to shape the way that market will end up opening up. And especially in the case of startups, like I think there are different forms of startups and different, it really depends upon the design sensitization of the startup owners, co-founders, slash everyone, and how sensitized they are to design and how their outlook to design is. If they would see design as something which is like say low value and something which needs to get done to put product out, then that is, I wouldn't want to be judging about that is right or wrong, but it in that context, in that urgency and time and context, it worked for them. Whereas there would be certain set of organizational entities in startups or bigger companies where they would want to focus on design and make sure that design is something which we want to use as a lever and use as a differentiating lever. So if you have that value system, so I use these three: sense, the sensibility, and the sensitivity of design. Then in that case, it's important. Then you automatically will change all your value chain so that design is given importance, and not the importance in terms of just a seat at the table, but you're using design actively. And if in some contexts, like say some products where the design quotient is lower, where you do not need so much of design and it's like a mass product or a commoditized product in many cases, there it's okay if design is not there, because like I said, design is an abstract form of value. Sometimes the pure, not, you heard of concepts like over design, right? You sometimes don't want things to be over designed, you want them to be simple, which itself is design. So not designing itself is design, which is simple, and it works for certain companies. Does that make sense? Like, so you get that entire range of
Right, right.
different contexts, different people, different types of startups, different companies. And I think that's the beauty of, like, there is design in everything, but at the same time, it's different. You calibrate how much of design, like we use this concept called the design interventions, which is like sprints in a way, where depending on where the fix needs to be, we'd send in design teams. So it's not that you can just do blanket design. Like there are some places where, like say, an industrial product group which you are working with, which has nothing to do with, normally you wouldn't expect क्या इसमें क्या design ही होगा. There's no design there, but you'd be surprised कि वहाँ पे बहुत design का scope है. That's how you look at design. So it's not just about the branding. It's about, like say, the assembly. It's about the takt time of being able to manufacture. It's about how fast you can deliver to the customer a piece of the entire system together. So I don't limit design only to say industrial design and physical design. Like I said, design is a little more uh, cohesive to all functions, and it really depends. So there's not in my I'm a design evangelist, so to say, and being that I am very pro that there is not any setting in the world which would not benefit out of design in some form, in some form. And it need not be a designer per se doing it, but it could be anyone. It could be, like say, even a labor, a laborer who's working in that manufacturing factory or production line, who brings some kind of a kaizen, which is the Japanese term of small improvements. If he brings something like that, which can actually trickle down or trickle up all the way through the value system, in which it causes a cultural change. So I consider that also design. So he designed a small solution, a small tweak, which then kind of went upwards and sideways to the entire organization. Then he started practicing that. So it's smaller seeds of design which could be there. So I do not rule out the capacity that almost everyone has the capacity for design. It's literally a human psyche trait that we want a better state. And in order to, from the current state to the better state, it's kind of the act of design and getting there, which is planning. So, some startups to bigger companies to everyone, I think all have a different context-based design quotient, and it is deployed at will. So there'll be times when you do not want to touch something and not over design it. There'll be times when, okay, this product is doing really well. We're in the startup mode. We've done our bootstrapping, and now we need to like level up a little bit more. So let's put in more design, like the design sauce or secret sauce on it, so that it can increase its value. And another last note I want to say is that a lot comes down to the price to value equation. In one of my core tenets, which I learned, is customers are paying a price, they are expecting a certain value. Design is one of the examples by which you can add that value. So it's not just about cutting the price down and reducing costs. Those are certain levers which we can play. But another lever which design can play is to be able to increase the value. So people don't have a problem of paying that kind of money. They just want a better bang for their buck, if I put it that way. So there again, these calls are taken by startup design teams, co-founders, larger companies, and it's about having a wisdom as to where to apply it and how much to apply rather than just it's very similar to like even how finance kind of runs in the startup ecosystem, like from all the series A, B, C plus the entire angel funding route. So of how capital, like how capital goes into a company and that entire company's trajectory changes. Like money is the lifeline for that startup or company. Similarly, I think design quotient also is something which runs inside a company, but it is depending on how much you over design or under design, or depends on what kind of context it's operating in. And many times people, the initial phase of setting up a company requires design because you need to put an identity out. Your first ever product, your flagship store, your flagship identity, all of that. So that's a time when there's a high requirement of design there. And then you probably would run with that same product for a certain time. And depending on when you want to innovate, that's the time you call in, like, say, design. Nothing like it if you can keep doing it all the time, but it's a little costly to do that. But if you can do it, nothing like it. So I hope that gave an idea. So I don't have a positive or an optimistic or a negative pessimistic outlook into it. I have a realistic outlook, and the realistic
Hmm.
outlook is that it's kind of like you have control over your car and you have the accelerator pedal. You can
Hmm.
choose the direction you want to go to, and you can choose the accelerator of how fast you want to get there. So you can use design that way.
I also love the way you articulated design not being a very boxed up thing about only logos in this, but it bleeds out to each and every facet of whatever you're doing.
Yeah,
And why I understand that is because when I was starting this, I had that in mind. Okay, I cannot maybe uh, pour out so much time into it because I have this sort of tendency to this sort of tendency of perfectionism, having things perfect before starting out. I always
yeah,
used to fall in the pit of that over designing stuff. Like I'm
right,
continuously sitting there and I'm doing and everything. So
right,
I was like, okay, let's go to the basics and let's
right,
cater out something that will to any degree be able to create an association towards what I do. That
right,
started with designing upon the color scheme, which I was very fundamental with. Key, okay, it's going to be white and it's going to be a little bluish and emerald greenish kind of a thing.
right,
And
right.
sort of the attire even that I wear, you'll see in each and every
Mhm.
podcast episode that I do, I wear the same outfit. That's
Right,
because
right.
it again is a part of that designing aspect of it. When
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
wear a white suit with a greenish sort of shirt that resembles the color scheme that I envisioned for the brand.
True, true.
And maybe you did give examples of Apple and IKEA. Any other
Oh, many,
famous products
many.
and brands that you feel are doing very well in this regard?
Like there are too many out there, to be
Hmm.
honest. Like like I want to plug in, like say something for. There's a lot of good work happening in Godrej also,
Hmm.
and but I want to like if I remember, when GoPro had kind of started as an action camera startup, I was a very very major GoPro proponent because, and this is way back when. This is so I started off with the first GoPros and the GoPro Heroes, and that's an example for me which actually stood because it was cameras have been there forever. They just made a nice, brilliant case around it such that it could be used in rougher conditions and underwater. And so a product of that nature kind of just changes life for you. Like I started scuba diving with that. It changed my work. I started doing research in a very different way. I would use GoPros to do time lapses and study places and say in architecture projects how the sun moves and interact with the space. And I do time lapses by just leaving the GoPro on a pole next to the site. So a brilliant product was those GoPro cameras when they started off. So I had the first ones, which was the silver and the white and the black and all of them. One, two, three, all of them. So the point being is that products of those nature which functionally can change my life, really, really, really uh, empower me. They are the ones which actually I stick and I have a direct recall that I know of that product which basically changed my life. And so it has a very, very heavy recall. Other products which are just looking good and very, very high quality and overdoing quality are like, they're good, they're hygienic, but it didn't change my life. So GoPro would be one example. But then obviously now there's a ton of more cameras which do the same thing. Uh, then I'm trying to recall like Decathlon as a Decathlon is a good inspiration for me when it comes to how, for the context at hand, they keep changing and innovating their designs. It's very similar to even an IKEA there because it's kind of mass, but at the same time, they understand the context there. Like in the Indian example, there were not major organized players in the area of sports and sporting goods. They penetrated into that market so well and offered everything. And not only did they offer good product, they offered also the experience which comes along. So when I remember going to the first decathlon around here and you're skating around the entire shop and then so that they got the experience curve right. And the other one was when you take the physicality of the products and you see it's not the greatest quality for sure, but it's not bad quality also. So it's somewhere in between, which has a certain, but it easily could access me products which could change my life. So I could buy scuba diving fins from there. I could buy a hammock suddenly for like $1,000, and I put a hammock in the balcony, and I'm now suddenly so smaller products like that versus like say dumbbells and say these elastic bands. Now these are all classic products which you will find in any store, and any sport manufacturer gives, but it's the way those bare minimum good quality products are made accessible to you in an experience like a decathlon experience, which changes the context. So something which I didn't expect to buy, but I'm there and I know that okay, if I really needed this, but it never struck me. But and then you take it and you see it's a good quality overall, and it's of a good like aesthetics overall, and it symbolizes also well that I'm active. It changes my life. So I like those products which have capacity to change life. Another example of a good product which I want to plug into is like there's a there's a there's a bed manufacturer who makes wrought iron beds, and they also use the IKEA format of flat packing. I'm sorry if I'm using too many physical examples, but I think first I'll use physical rather than going into the non-physical. So in this time and age, there's a very less amount of people actually going to like you've seen the ply old school carpentered ply beds. You've seen steel beds and it's typical. But then I really aspired when I was setting up a new house, which was in the area of like I want an old school wrought iron vintage style bed and a king size. and I stumbled upon a brilliant company. I don't want to give a plug out of the name of the company, but the point being is that it, and as a designer, I'd like to assemble it myself. I wouldn't want a service personnel to come and do it myself. So I have so much, I have a huge learning curve. Like I said, the curiosity drives me. So not only the act of buying, purchasing, but also the act of entirely building it from scratch. You get to learn so much as a designer with that, and not just as a designer, as a human being. So I'm a major fan of the DIY culture, and not just that, that culture basically makes you a very good man Friday or a good handyman. So in any setting in life, knowingly, unknowingly, have a curious brain to solve that problem somehow because you've got experience of dealing with these kind of setups. So a brilliant example of a good vintage style, and it's not many manufacturers in that space which makes a, and at a really drop dead price, and they, so it was inspiring to find those products which really change your life, like I said. And also it's not a big change to your life, but it's a small change which recalls, and you have like a good experience doing that. So I have those examples. So yeah, the name of the company is I think it's Original Bed Company, and
Okay. Hmm.
big company. And like, and other than that, like the GoPro examples, the I think product wise, like there are many new age products which are not, my recall is not coming well. Like even in the case of like say things like headphones which are so commoditized right now. Like shout out to smaller brands who also are making such good, because like I always had, like I used to buy the more costlier ones and I'd like lose one, or I'm riding a bike and like say one falls off. So then I kind of go down to like smaller companies like say even sometimes a boat and a Portronics, because I know I'm going to be rough in use and one of them is going to fall off. So it gives me that bare minimum quality which I need to be rough usage to. And then I'd probably have a Bose or another good one when I'm there in the house in the setting in which I want to enjoy the music in toto. So many, good examples of so many products coming out, and that's also a lot of choice which is being rolled out there. And so I think it's important that customers and consumers overall need also to have a better, like be more informed about why you're buying what you're buying, rather than just a consumeristic rat race. You can just buy and throw and use, and it's like the options, and design is the blood on that hands is on design, because we keep pumping out new designs, new products, and flooding the market with so many options. And I think where it's good if you can, like, rather than have so much option and being spoiled with options, it's have good to have a certain designated number of SKUs, but so there's a fit for everyone, and at the same time there's quality in the numbers. Otherwise, we lose ourselves in the numbers where there's a huge amount of SKUs. SKU is stock keeping units, which is the like the variant. So take say a product like this, you'll have like 5 colors of this, and that's it. As opposed to being a manufacturer who makes like say 500 colors of this. So there are things which are an overkill, and that happens in planning and strategy versus something which is much more simpler. But it gives the customer a good recall function, and like it changes their lives. Those would be my good examples to go to. I hope that helped. Otherwise, I'm gonna
One
go on boring you.
one other example of rebranding that was not received by the consumers well was of Jaguar. They redesigned
Hmm.
their logo and suddenly there was a lot of backlash of sorts about
Hmm.
how they primarily changed the brand's identity in terms of what it stood for. Like,
Uh-huh.
what do you think are the pointers or markers to keep in mind while you are going through a phase or transition of rebranding your venture? Because
Right.
umpteen times the existing customers and people who have come with you and are loyal to you, they attach a notion of your brand,
Yeah.
that
Yeah. It's very
this,
true.
and then when you're going through a rebranding phase, it becomes a very common pitfall to not
Correct.
be able to identify and be catering to those existing customers in
Mm-hmm.
order to create out or carve out a new brand identity. What is the
Right.
correct balance between these two?
I'm not the subject matter expert on branding, but I obviously will have a I ought to have a slight comment on it, as to say,
Hmm.
uh, again, very subjective. Uh, I think there's a certain value systems which lie in brands, And the brand identity is one example which captures that values and which the customer has, like I said, front of the house and back of the house. So the customer deals with the front of the house in perceiving here, ye brand, ye, it stands for this, it is this. And then there's the back of the house which supports its front. I suggest that in those cases where the value systems completely remain the same and there's no need to change a value system, then in that case, it's better to not be very outlandish and change or adapt into a complete new being. It's like a big makeover of a particular brand. So that would be one way. There are sometimes that a company wants to change. So maybe they were earlier more fuddy-duddy and old school, but now they want to be a little more uh, appealing to the youth. Then in that case, there is a need for that change to transition. But in doing that transition, you wouldn't want to lose the values of the old. So there will be some values which were there which you want to take forward, and there are some values which you do not want to take forward. And that transition in the brand identity as well as the identity through design is your chance to be able to capture that change and capture that change in a way such that you don't lose the earlier spirit. Like I actually, there's a very misunderstood word which is the spirit. Like we think of other spirits, but the spirit of the brand should continue in a new vigor. So it's the same spirit, but it's in new vigor. And so things like designing of products, experiences, offerings, all of them kind of captures that spirit. And an identity like a brand identity is one of those key visuals because people look at that visual, which is so encapsulating all that amount of value, which represents. So it kind of is a small symbol which kind of represents all of it. So in doing that, like rather than a big shift, like I'm the Jaguar example, I'm not that very familiar with from a design point of view, but a brand as big as Jaguar and a recall value of Jaguar, like everyone knows about it. Tata made sure that it becomes a brilliant case study for all Indians world over. But the point being is that it's already got a very, very strong seat of salience, brand salience in our hearts, everyone's hearts. So so I would not be so affected by what the outcome of the brand identity is because it's got so much of equity already. But companies which have smaller equity, they have to do for them the risk is higher. In the case of a bigger company, which is yes, the risk is high because there's the legacy brand which you're touching. So, but at the same time, the legacy's brand values and equity is still intact. So the spirit is intact. So I wish I could say more about this particular example we spoke to, but it wouldn't be right because I don't know the exact details about it. But
Hmm.
like I said, when when the equity and the salience of the brand is so high, it doesn't matter the change of identity. So if I would prefer, like I'm a loyalist of the old, so I'm kind of old school when it comes to like logos and identities, like, and especially if you have a good identity which is really working for you, like my suggestion would be just keep it, just don't touch it. Like there's wealth in things not being designed, and there's wealth in things being kept in a certain way. And there'll be contexts where, yes, there is a need for a new vigor. In that case, it makes sense to be able to have a, complete new makeover. But sometimes, or in fact, like a good amount of times when the brand identity logo is all working for you, I think it's good to like just leave it there and not play with it too much. So again, subjective. I don't know if I confused you enough, but
No, I think you were able to give a pretty good pan out of the entire thing, that the primary question that I wanted to ask to you about. Another
Mhm.
thing that I would want to ask you about is, as somebody who's very curious and intrigued and gets that uh, cognitive
Yeah.
high with designing stuff and getting new ideas and trying to explore them to the fullest, how do you tread the fine line between designing something while
Mhm.
also making sure that that innovation you are able to effectively be able to generate outputs and while also maintaining the practicality of whatever you're designing?
Right. Good question. Very good question. Like this is something which I'm a, this is one of my core values regarding design. Since we speak about design, there's going to be a controversial thing I'm going to say, but I really stick by it, which is I consider good design as good business. So if it makes good business, and when I mean good business, I don't mean a very capitalistic, raw, aggressive business mindset. I mean to say that a valuable business, like where the customer gets a good offering from a business house, and I want to be part of that story where I can work and be part of work which is a business which is ethical, conscious, which can give customers pure value and delight. I want to be part of that entire world. So, like in doing so, like earlier, I think in the initial part of my career, I was just like more excited to like keep doing. So design, identity, product, experience, experience centers, all of it. And then I think you kind of get through experience uh, the element of slowing down and being more focused on your energies. So rather than just the act of doing as design, you're more selective of where and what to design. And this is something which we kind of were taught throughout in design school and have had the best of schools and best of mentors and professors. And I think it was taught to us all throughout, but we kind of never registered and got it. So जब हम fresh academia से we enter into the industry, there is a lot of energy which is bustling in us. Which, yeah, I want to design this, I want to design that, and you're ready to like design everything and help the world and like you're ready to design anything and everything. And then you kind of slowly understand that the entire supply chain of design is to like the act of the research, the concept, to putting it out in the market. And then once you go through those cycles, it kind of makes you more humble in changing that now we don't do so much of time and energy and resources in the act of designing per se, but much more in the act of figuring out what to design, which is far much more important than the mere act of designing. So, and especially when it comes to tools, and since we speak about AI a lot, like there's so many tools which are going to be democratized. There are so many tools which will end up giving you a lot of leverage. But there's a main seat which is a big void is the act in the first stage of design कि भाई बनाना क्या है किसके लिए ही है and that entire journey of finding what do you want to make, why you want to make, who are you making it for, what are the nuances and sensitizations you need to be there. That entire gamut is something which I am a proponent of trying to focus on. So rather than just the act of making, it's the act of figuring what to make and what it represents and all of that. So it's a gradual transition for me, and it's been a big learning curve for me over time. Like I've been there in the industry for like close to 15 years now, and it just that's a big transition from initially this hyper like how designers I got to design this, I got to design that versus now okay now let's figure out what we are designing here. Should we even design it? Should we go? And then it has a heavy research component in it, and that research is a formative research which it literally attacks our biases because we have so many biases running. We have our there's an employer bias, an employee bias, our own biases, personal biases of what we ought the customer would like. And the moment you go and interact with this entire, बहुत बारी when you end up making products, putting it out, then you understand, oh, this one failed so badly, this one worked well, this one was okay, and then they kind of spun it off in another way, and then suddenly shot up really well. It humbles you. So you come back to the drawing table, and then it kind of like recalibrates. Ki, okay, now I think I should focus on who I need to make it for, and then your energies get diverted there. So it's not the act of possibly the designing, but it's the act of figuring out what to design. What, why, who, when, all of that. I hope that helped.
Yes, yes. Um, with this, in continuation to this,
Hmm.
as a, let's say, a 5 step process, like make it six, make it four, make it three, up to you. But as a sort of 5 step process, what
Yeah.
do you advise the new ventures again, who might not have many resources or time, as in
Sure, sure.
to invest, but as guiding lights, what
Sure.
would you advise them to keep in mind while
Yeah,
going through
yeah,
launching
yeah.
their everything in regards to
Sure, sure.
designing?
I think I don't want to sound preachy or prescriptive about this. Like, there's awesome guys like Naval Ravikant and all who kind of have a way in which, like, I do not want to sound preachy. Like, you need to be, I could share what I think is important because, like, I keep wondering how I would be like at this time if I was just young and getting into the industry because you have access to everything. Like I come from a time in which internet and the phone and like we didn't have internet, we didn't have phones, we didn't have like computers. To in a comparison right now, you literally have everything on your plate. So it is about exercising choice of where to do and what to do and operate. So rather than rushing into decisions and just like a headless chicken doing curve, it's important to do, but be a little bit more mindful. And this is not just from the reel of, being demure and mindful, but it's literally being more choosy. Be a little choosy because you have a lot of choice. So if there are whatever the act be, if you are into architecture, in the built environment, in the physical product space, in the UI UX space, whatever space be in, be a little more choosy actively because you know that there's a lot to choose from rather than just keep jumping. That's one major thing. And the second thing is that in whichever you choose to do, be a little more intense and go deeper in that, such that you're getting your hands dirty well enough. So I would be a little wary about, just touching some experience, doing it a little bit, and then jumping to the next one and jumping to the next one, as opposed to like going back to the food example, savor your food. So first choose well your food and then also savor it. So that it doesn't need to be like a very grab and go eat fast and get to the next one. So with all due respect to the hustle culture, there are certain acts in life which you need to slow down for and calm down. This is one in which you can be more choosy about what you want to do. It could be what you want to design, how you want to design, how you want to scale up, how you want to slow down, all of that. But be more mindful about it and more intense about it. So go in deeper. So if the like we kind of get very, very easily influenced by social media and just generally everything happening all around, especially the West. But in that, it's important to have your own like originality and approach to it. So which makes you happy first. It and not makes you happy per se, but makes you content. So that you get to a point where you're comfortable under your skin. And that really helps a lot. It helps in people being a little more authentic and original and themselves rather than operating under biases and operating for society. That I need to do this to be able to make and be so great. And then after that, you don't know why you were doing it. So it's better to figure out the whys when you're doing it rather than just jumping out of social pressure. That's a major suggestion. So one is the act of getting your hands dirty, and two is, and when I mean getting your hands dirty, don't always be on the safety fence of whatever you have been exposed to. So when I mean getting your hands dirty, I also mean like explore, like really truly explore things which are not in your comfort zone. I know that sounds cliche, but you never know that one random exhibition you went for, a conference you went for, or a friend you came to know was working in a particular industry and you just went and met him and then you saw the factory or you saw the terminal, you saw the UI UX experience, you saw something and you got inspired. Please go after that. Don't just let it be. Like feed your curiosity. I know curiosity kills the cat and all that's like the other aspect, which is you do over curiosity, but don't be just comfortable just with what you know. You keep feeding that curiosity a little bit, and once you find something which catches your fancy, go a little deep, spend a little time there. So that would be my one suggestion to everyone. And the thing is that there's no fear of like say failure. There's no fear of this thing. I think that's really overdone. Uh, but I really like life is fragile, time is fragile. You don't know when you're going to get that experience again. So when you're at it, give it your 100%. It kind of makes the entire experience more worth. And then when you're done with that experience and moving to the next one, you'll be a little more. soulfully, like it feels good. मैंने बहुत try किया. I got whatever I could do out of this, and now I want to move to the next one. So it's helpful there. So that's fine.
You know
So
what? I'll ask the final question. Let's move into the final segment itself.
sure, 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 sure.
As a sort of tradition on the show, the final
Mhm.
segment is asking the guests about what their word to humanity at large is. So, Mr. Thomas, what your word to humanity is at large?
Right. That sounds so much pressure because it also sounds old, which makes me feel. I feel like I'm dying right now. But uh, if it was just one I'd want to leave people by with is this four-letter word. I know people must be already thinking it's love, but it's not love. It's live. Just, live experiences, whatever be it. It could be all of it. It could be happiness, it could be sadness, it could be contentment, it could be ambition, all those emotions. I think people, if they just live it more, like even the act of work, we segregate everything between life and work balance and all that, but just live a little more intensely. It could be work, it could be emotions, it could be relationships, it could be all of it. Like, be a little more intense about things because currently the kind of conditioning and the world way how things are going is it's a lot of stimuli from everywhere. So it's important to be able to choose, zone out, and then choose and live whatever you're doing. So when I mean the word live, and they have those memes about being a liver, but that's just the funny part of it. But just live all those experiences. So if it's work, if it's design, if it's anything under the sun, like live it more intensely. That would be one. Yeah.
Mr.
I
Tojo
hope that.
Jacob Thomas, thank you so very much. And
My
I
pleasure.
am sure this episode was personally, I learned a lot. And I'm very, very sure that people who will be turning in, they'll get a heck lot to learn from it. So thank
No,
you
no,
so
I'm
very much for joining in.
truly grateful to you. Pleasure's all mine.